Welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. Thank you again for tuning in. Of those of you that listen on a regular basis, either as an investor or an entrepreneur, know that our purpose here is to create wealth, to show people how to create wealth by building successful entrepreneur endeavors, bringing innovation to the market, investing in that so that you can take the ride with that successful entrepreneur. And the passion part of Compassionate Capitalists is, investing in entrepreneurs that share a similar passion and the thing that they're doing, or what the innovation they're doing, or their approach to the marketplace. So you get to do that and make money at the same time. And so in that space, we've not done a show in a while that is on sustainability or on, alternative energy, or, that sector of the asset classes, and part of, my whole thing is investing in entrepreneurs is its own asset class. And then just like when we did one a while back on public companies, investing in public companies that are sustainable as part of that. But, to talk about investing in something that is having an impact because you're funding multiple projects that are going to change the world. Okay, I can say that. My guest today may blush at the fact that I believe he's changing the world, but I do believe that. And this is all about bringing renewable energy projects into the marketplace from around the world that creates an alternative to fossil fuel and balances out the way we consume that, way we consume our energy, and the offset of what is created that is contributing to global warming. So that's the whole point of becoming less fossil fuel dependent, is to save our environment and for generations to come, right? So let me introduce you to my guest, and then we are going to dive into this, the great stuff he's done in the past and the stuff that he's doing now. My guest is Mike Silvestrini with Energea. He's the managing partner at Energea and co-founder. He's an enviro-capitalist. Okay, so we're going to unpack it. That's probably pretty self-explanatory, but I'm sure Mike's got some other things to go along with that. But so let me explain this a little bit. So Energea is a renewable energy retail investment platform, and Mike and his team has a lot of experience in this. His first company was Greenskies Renewable Energy that he started in 2011 and had a very profitable exit in 2017. It was focused on installing solar energy systems, primarily in commercial sectors. And prior to getting on here for this recording, we had a long conversation about, sort of the breakthroughs that he has as an entrepreneur that had led him to that, to be able to be so successful in that. And so we'll talk about that. But when he exited out of that, he saw an opportunity to connect other investors and connect investors that really when you say retail investor, it's like somebody that would invest in a stock market or a stock company that might be one company has an opportunity, because the way it's structured, to invest in this as if it was a retail investment product, but all focused on renewable energy. So it was really fascinating when Mike came to me, because I'm just delighted that there's an organization out there that has that kind of focus and making it accessible to so many different types of investors. Because those of you that have listened to my shows talking about the Jobs Act, to me, the Jobs Act and Reg A Plus are one of the best ways that anybody can create wealth from investing in entrepreneur endeavors and innovation without all the risk of doing it themselves, right? You get to just put money at, and money can be replaced. Time and all the other stuff you have to do when it comes to being an entrepreneur doesn't get replaced, right? So it is a great way and that's what I talk about in the book as well, right? So, with that, I think I've talked enough. I've given you enough of a reason why Mike's here. I want him to talk about Greenskies and Greenskies Renewable Energy. So, Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on the Compassionate Capitalist Show.
Thanks, Karen. Appreciate you having me. Appreciate the intro too.
Yeah. So how did you get started in solar? 2011, we still think of it as really kind of new now, even though it's been around a while. 2011 was, really sort of, convincing people that this was something, or schools and businesses, that this was something that they should invest in or benefit from, because there's things besides just your own energy. And that's, a lot of people will unpack that so people understand solar and how it's used on a commercial sector a little bit better. But how'd you get started in solar?
Yeah, so I was in grad school at Boston University, and I graduated in 2008. And so I think the business technically started around time. And in that time, we were at war, in Iraq. My brother was actually in that battle. He was in Fallujah and in Ramadi, and it was a pretty serious conflict. And a lot of that conflict had to do with energy and fossil fuels, and sure, one way or other. Also, that was the year that the UN panel on climate change essentially proved beyond the shadow of a doubt what many of us had already assumed, which is that mankind has an impact on the atmosphere, which is kind of makes sense because we create exhaust with the activities and behaviors that we all do all day, every day. And that exhaust doesn't have anywhere to go except for up into the atmosphere. And some of those are obviously greenhouse gases. And so it's no real surprise that we can impact our atmosphere the way we can impact all aspects of planet Earth. So it felt to me at the time that solar energy was a really interesting technology with a lot of potential. It has no exhaust whatsoever, produces electricity. It's made from the most abundant element on Earth, which is silicon. And we felt that the cost had just started to go down. My first project, for example, was about $9 per watt. And today we build in the neighborhood of 65 cents per watt. So a project that might cost me, sort of $1 million today would have cost me $12 million.
Wow.
In 2008. So that got us excited. We didn't know much about business, thank God, because I don't think solar energy really penciled well back in those days. But since then, costs have gone down year after year after year. Actually, this is the first year where I've seen solar energy costs creep up a tick, just because of the challenge of importing solar equipment or anything really from China, shortage of containers. There's also an energy crisis happening in China right now, which is curtailing some of the manufacturers. So long story short, solar has pretty much always gotten cheaper. This year, we're seeing the reaction to COVID and sort of the blowback in the economy of that, which has caused some price increases. But it is the most competitive form of energy in many markets around the world. Not everywhere, because it does depend on many variables, the cost of electricity, how sunny it is, the cost of labor, and many other variables that affect the levelized cost of electricity. But we can say with certainty that solar energy is the cheapest form of electricity in most of the world right now. And it's really exciting to now take all that hard-earned experience over the last 15 years and then put that to use in an economy where it is really, it's a pricing decision that our clients make, not really an environmental one. And it's also a pricing decision that most of our investors make. But that's fine, because the net result of our efforts is less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that was the idea, was to align the horsepower of capitalism with an outcome of sustainability, and create a product where the more of it we buy, the better off we are. And I think we've done that now a couple times between Greenskies and Energea.
Yeah. So what was the value proposition in those, back then when you were initially selling into school systems to put it on the roofs of schools, and then on into traditional commercial businesses, some of the large retailers, big boxes? Was it an emotional, let's do the right thing, or was it they really ultimately saw an impact to their bottom line, their balance sheet, to reduce some of their variable expenses when it comes to the cost of electricity and power?
I think everybody along the journey has wanted to install solar because it's the impact on climate change. Somewhere in the back of their mind, that concept lies. But I don't think that's the driving force behind any of the decisions. And it's kind of different for each customer. Like one of our first customers was a company called Chemicals, and it was a family-owned business. And there were a lot of incentives in the state of Massachusetts. So we were able to install a solar array that was slightly cheaper than their current electricity. They did save money by buying the solar from us over a 20-year energy contract. And we were able to get that power cheaper. At the time, we needed grants in order to offer them that power at a discounted rate, but it worked. And they wanted it for their business. They're a chemical distribution company, and they just wanted it, and they made it happen. And they were one of our first customers. Not far after them, we started working with Walmart, and Walmart had a completely different interest. It was to show the marketplace their sincerity for the lives of their customers and their environmental efforts. And they were dead serious when Walmart says, we're going to try to get rid of our carbon footprint. They stand behind that effort, and they will wheel billions into these types of efforts. And so we started becoming a service provider to Walmart in their efforts to decarbonize their own business. So there are a variety of different reasons, but every project that we've done ultimately has been to save our customers energy expenses. Because that sort of gives them the license to say yes,
right?
Which I think everybody kind of wants to do.
Yeah, and it probably gets amortized over a period of time anyway, so they can work with their numbers.
They pay zero. What they're agreeing to do is just buy electricity from us at a discounted rate.
Okay.
It's an energy purchase commitment.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then that's just offsetting whatever they consume on their traditional fossil fuel.
Yeah, we'll knock out their electric bill goes from like $3,000 a month to like zero.
Okay.
And then we send them but now they have two electric bills. They're gonna get one from Energea, and that might be $1,000. So their aggregate electric bill is significantly lower than their old electric bill, and that makes them happy.
Yeah. So that's why
we collect that revenue, and we're the ones making a return on the upfront investment of buying the power plant.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why the capital infrastructure was so hard when you would have to go in and do a big install, because you would get your return on that over an extended period of time.
Right. So you need financing, and you need investors to do this stuff, to build the capital equipment. And then once you own the plant, the fuel is free. So you're pretty much just harvesting revenue from day one, and they last 20 years or 30 years. So it's a pretty good situation once you get the plant up and operational.
So it would seem like some of those municipalities, like I saw in some of your press releases from back then under Greenskies Renewable, like former landfills were getting put in. So they're
the favorite projects.
Yeah. So the municipality says, you know what? We want to provide an alternative source of power, on our grid or whatever for our community. And we got this giant hole in the ground, or this, this mound thing, whatever. We could go and cart it off and reduce it when they burn it. But let's do something that comes in and stays, it doesn't go away. It's not a site, it's just sun. Right. And so that's really interesting. Were you like knocking on doors and saying, hey, you got this old landfill, or meeting with city council and proposing it? Or were some of them knocking on your doors, or was it kind of both, just depending on how much people knew you by 2010 or 2012, 15, whatever, as you grew?
I can't think of a circumstance where a customer knocked on our door. That would be amazing. But we certainly got out there and started. We're teachers, it's a relatively new asset class, especially 10 years ago. We spent a lot of time just providing an educational service to our customers about what their options were with this technology. And then that's the way we treated it, at least, is that we're there to be the experts of a particular type of technology that may or may not be useful to our customers. Yeah. And if they didn't want to pursue solar, that's okay. Yeah. We did our job by providing them that service. And then we would eventually reap the rewards of providing that service well enough that the argument was compelling to so many of our customers.
Yeah.
We did hundreds of solar projects. And at one point in time, in the last year that I was CEO of the business, we were ranked #1 nationally in terms of commercial scale renewable energy deployment in megawatts. So it works. You got to stick with it. And it's a very capital intensive business. So you got to always be raising capital in order to buy these power plants, essentially. And that's why, that's where Energea comes into play. Is, we kept on going to the banks. I just signed a contract with Walmart. I go to the bank, I borrow the money, I build the project, and then I service the debt and collect a profit. So that was pretty much typical for the Greenskies experience. After selling Greenskies, we wanted to switch that. I felt that the ownership of these solar power plants is actually really useful to retail investors. People who are investing lots of stocks or cryptocurrency or whatever they're investing in these days. There's a lot of, you talk a lot about, the venture capital opportunities, investing in startups, things like Start Engine or Masterworks, where you can invest in a work of art. And as you mentioned, a lot of this comes out of the Jobs Act. But, we wanted to take solar assets and bring that asset class to the general population, kind of the way Coinbase bought crypto to the general population. Simplifying a very complex investment so that anybody with a pair of thumbs can become an investor in something that we think is important and profitable.
And so just in time to insert right here, Energea.com. That's where they can get information. We're going to talk more about it, but that's where, people listen. So it's Energea.com. The link is down in the show notes, but make note of that of everybody as you're listening. Thanks. Because I'm sure you're going to want to go to the website and check out by the time we're finished with this. And, I know where I'm going to go put some money. All right. So let me ask this, right? Let's talk about solar as a technology, if you will, because, there's a lot of misperceptions. I mean, you touched a little bit on like the carbon tax stuff, and people kind of talk about carbon. And I want to encourage people, dig way back in my archives, because I've done 2 podcasts on carbon credits and carbon taxes and renewable energy like that like a decade ago. And the first one I did was with a VC that set up exchanges outside the U.S. because the U.S. is not as forward thinking when it comes to, helping businesses decide about, producing carbon, offsetting carbon, all that kind of stuff. It is actually something that can be measured and transacted and loaned against in other markets, in other, stock exchanges and things like that. And so it was about that. And it was actually probably one of my highest rated shows forever. When I first came out with it, and if you did a Google of carbon tax credits, it was the top article for like a year or so. It was really at the beginning of it. It was just fascinating to me because it's so hard to wrap your head around this, something that you can't really see, you know what I mean? And how do you, all that kind of stuff. And so when it comes to solar, break it down real simple, like how does solar get captured, turned into energy, and stored where it's not just, I got my solar light on in my yard and it's dead by morning. And I don't like, so explain to people that may only know about solar twinkle lights or the solar panel they see on their friend's house, how this really works when it comes to our power grid in the US, and, throw in any other international references to it you might, because I know other countries have a bigger challenge on fossil fuel. So they have leaned towards alternatives even more so than in the United States. But just really basically how does solar work to offset our consumption on fossil fuels when producing energy?
Right. So, first off, understand that the grid is sort of this flowing river where every single electrical device in the United States is connected by copper wire to every single other electrical device in the United States. So there's literally just a a long, very long series of wires that are connected to each other that creates a current, a circuit. So we have imagine the grid as a massive circuit, and flowing through that circuit is electricity. And it's, there's various components and descriptions of that electricity, but think of it as simply as just like flowing water, like a river. And every time we put a bucket of water into the river, more of those devices can consume that water, which weakens the flow. So you have to keep on adding buckets of water into the river so that the flow can be maintained, so that all those electrical devices can be on or off at their choosing. So that's the status quo. The primary drivers for that river right now are large hydro plants, where that can be done, large natural gas power plants, a little bit of coal in the United States, a little bit of oil in the United States. Those are our primary devices. But now we're starting to say, well, let's push that water through that circuit through technologies that don't produce any carbon dioxide. And that's primarily wind and solar. Solar is really a unique type of power plant. It doesn't have a turbine. Basically a wind power plant is just a turbine, only, it turns that turbine with the wind that hits the blades of the windmill, rather than creating steam by boiling water by burning coal. But it's still a turbine at the end of the day. It's just turning through a different mechanical energy. But for solar, it's a reactive process where there's an electron on the outer shell of silicon. And when photon comes from the sun and hits that silicon atom, it throws that electron in the outer shell off. It jumps to the next atom of silicon. And that's called the photosensitive process. And if you align a bunch of silicon atoms all in a row and you hit it with photons, all those electrons start jumping. And we basically trap those in aluminum pathways, and you keep on putting more and more of them together. So first we take a cell where that is occurring, and then we put 72 cells in a piece of aluminum framing, and then we put 60 aluminum frames next to each other, and which creates a string, and then we put 100 strings together. So we keep on just stacking more and more and more silicon atoms in series, and then creating and hitting them with photons, watching that electrical activity, collecting it, and then sending it off to the grid and adding to that flowing river of electricity. I don't know if that helps at all, but
that was brilliant. That was brilliant. You should hopefully sometimes you go in and are a guest speaker in our elementary and middle schools.
I do that from time to time.
Yeah, because that was perfect. Okay, so then it's going into the grid, it offsets. So basically the things that I've kind of heard is that when there's solar energy available on the grid, then people just aren't consuming from these other places.
Yeah.
And they kind of turn those on at night, and it sort of just balances out, and you just replace one colored water with a different colored water, so to speak.
Solar takes the priority. Our grid operators around our country, and it's done in different ways in different states and different regions of our country. But essentially, those operators are going to accept the carbon-free electricity first. So the last thing is going to get turned off is going to be sort of solar. So we want that to be operating all the time. And then, but the solar can't produce all the electricity that we need. So then we're going to take the next cheapest or sometimes the most environmentally friendly, depends on the decision-making process of that particular grid operator. It also depends on the availability of the electricity. How fast can they summon it and turn that power plant on? So there's a lot of different features that a grid operator has to kind of assemble into a puzzle of every 5 minutes, making sure the right amount of electricity is on the grid for the amount of electricity that's being demanded by energy. And that's a never-ending process of balancing the grid. But so we can still in a situation where we can consume all the solar that's generated in the instant that it's generated.
So where does regulation, we talked a little bit earlier before we got on the call about some of the challenges that different regions of the U.S., state by state, regulate, whether like of a business, like in your case, you explained like Walmart or those folks, that they have they use it themselves. They're not necessarily putting it out there because they're buying it from you. And so they're consuming some, and whatever is excess, when you were running Greenskies, or it was put out onto the grid and somebody else was buying it, but that's not the way it works everywhere. Is that,
Yeah. So like,
do that right?
by the way, we do US solar projects at Energea, and people can log in and invest in those as well. But the important thing to understand is that different states have different rules, and there's a difference between regulated states and regulated states. The West Coast, the East Coast, and sort of the Northeast are deregulated states. This happened after Enron, when we decided to have a little bit more control over how the markets were going to work on an energy basis. And they basically state that if you can create power that's cheap and sell to somebody, it's an open market. You're welcome to do that. But in the Southeast and select other states, but especially in the southeastern part of the United States, you have what's called a regulated market. And there, only the utility company can legally sell power. You can't compete against the utility company legally. And then there's been all sorts of ways that solar companies have tried to get around that. We've tried to say, well, can you generate, what if Walmart can't buy power from me, but they can create their own power, right? What if they have a diesel generator on site for when the power goes out? You tell me that's illegal? No, that's legal. Well, so they can generate their own power. So then I won't sell you power. I will lease you a solar power plant. There becomes ways that solar can still persevere despite the restrictions that the utility companies have upheld. And essentially, most of the solar done in those states is done by the utility company, so that, no opportunity shared with the private sector if it can be avoided.
Yeah, I know down here that one of the things I had heard was one of our challenges, and this was sort of set up eons ago in the US, is that most, the power companies have to go to increase rates. And the only way they can do that is if they are expanding infrastructure. So they have gone into doing some solar because it becomes new energy, and they can raise their rates, because the only way they grow their revenue is either population grows or they grow their rates, right? So now that's just sort of like on, I think at least in Georgia, and I wonder if it's like this in every state, we're not going to get political, but act local, right? When you're concerned about whatever's going on, people listening to this can influence how things get done in your local municipality. If you're offsetting their consumption there, contributing better. And I think it's the Public Service Commissioner is the one that really sort of sets the tone on energy in a state. Is that the right role? And those elections come up in 2 years. Those elections are. So
I'm definitely not trying to, point fingers, but there are, because remember, at the end of the day, we rely on those institutions to make sure that a light turns on every time we flip a switch. And they were saying, well, we're just not sure about this renewable stuff. Sounds like a technology. Now that excuse is kind of gone, right? Because we know it works at scale in many, many grids all over. You don't see. We have a lot of, where I'm from in Connecticut, there's plenty of solar. It has not made it more difficult for the grid operator to operate. So I think that excuse that, they were scared of the presence of an intermittent resource is kind of, that ship has sailed. So now, we should start expecting and to some degree demanding that the utility companies and the regulators of our states allow for more solar, because it should be an open market. And if my electron is cheaper than their electron, then so be it. I think that's the only way to look at it.
I think, but folks, if you look into whatever's happening in your state, in your local municipality, your county, and see if they are taking action towards reducing the carbon footprint of that community and helping to expand alternative sources of energy, because it's just makes sense, right? So let's talk about Energea. You had the successful exit, and you saw an opportunity to do a different business model when it came to investing in alternative energy. So let's talk about how you came up with that. And did you do that right after 2018? You like started it 2020. How long have you been doing Energea?
Yeah, basically since 2018, I partnered with a buddy of mine I've been friends with since kindergarten, my whole life. And his name is Chris Sattler. And he and I were doing some nonprofit work together in Kenya, where we are board members of a wildlife conservation group that basically anti-poaching army, about 400 rangers in southern Kenya. We patrol 2.2 million acres. Wow. And he and I have been friends for a long time. He also started an energy company in 2008 and sold it in 2017. So we were on very parallel paths. His company was a deregulated energy supply company. He founded it and sold it to Calpine, the largest energy company in the US. So we had just kind of come through a similar experience. We decided that we were going to invest in some renewable energy ourselves. And we started looking around for some projects. We found some things that we really liked in Brazil. And we started investing in a pair of hydro power plants and some solar power plants down in Brazil. And we created a little business to just kind of create those projects for our personal investments. And then we quickly realized that, there's probably a lot of people that would like to invest in this type of product. We were getting 18, 19% contracted yield for 20 years. That's really hard to find. Most dividend stocks are like 4%, 5%. But if you know what you're doing and you know how to examine a market and you're willing to take a little bit of risk, there's a lot more value to be created out there. But we had to find the right infrastructure for how do we go about sharing this investment opportunity with others. And then we stumbled across Regulation A. And Regulation A allowed us to take our investment thesis, in this case, perhaps community solar in Brazil, or solar plus batteries in South Africa, or surefire solar power plants in the northeastern US. So we created these different investment themes. And each theme, we put a fund around it. And then we went through the Reg A process so that we can invite anybody, accredited or non-accredited, for a minimum as little as $100 to participate in climate change mitigating technology and to enjoy the yield benefits, the environmental benefits, and the uncorrelated characteristics of this asset class. And we think that a lot of people are looking for alternatives now, given how overheated the equities markets are. We think that bond markets have basically, they're out of the game. They're so low that they're below inflation. We've pumped up crypto about as much as we can imagine, maybe even more. So where are we going to start investing next? And our argument is, how about renewable energy, for crying out loud? We need more of this stuff. We're under investing by about $1 trillion a year globally into renewable energy assets in order to prevent 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels of climate change, which is not a pretty picture. So how are we going to get more cash into this asset class? Well, let's ask everyone. Let's get everybody and give everybody at least the option of participating in this thing. So it's not only a great return on investment. This is our realized yield thus far is over 12%, which would put us, up there with most private equity funds and, top half of any private equity fund, but it's available to anybody. So, I think that's kind of a new level of investment for many people, but it also is the climate mitigating technology. So maybe maybe American investors can band together and buy up big chunks of this new energy grid that the world is building. And that's our vision.
Yeah. Wow. So, yeah, I love the fact that it's available to anybody. That's the beauty of Reg A Plus, as the first part of what came out under the Jobs Act, is that it is, and for those, you since you've been through the process multiple times, raised lots of money under it. You're probably significantly better equipped at explaining this than I am. Let me give it a shot. It says that, the whole idea is most often it's not startups, it's funds, like in your case, but it's not startups because the SEC requires a certain level of financials to be reviewed as if they were going public, but they're not necessarily going public.
You have to audit it. You have to provide audited financial statements on the whatever it is that you're funding, whether it's a company or a portfolio of solar projects or a piece of art or a piece of real estate. You can kind of fund anything you want with Reg A, but you have to audit its financial statement.
Yeah.
For sure.
So for those that are not familiar with Reg A Plus, it was the framework was established in 2012 with the Jobs Act. It didn't come out till 2015, I think, was when it was first. The SEC got all the rules done, and it's been around a long time. It is what various funds, banks, big projects had used to raise money on a public basis. It had a lot of rules to it, but it was not used that often. They opened up in the way that people could participate, the way Mike is doing it with Energea, and expanded it to people that are really of any kind of financial means. So if you are somebody that looks at your own portfolio, you do E-Trade, which is like the target market, for my book, it's, somebody that wants to invest in innovation that has a direct impact on that innovation getting done. When you buy and sell stocks on the regular old stock market, you're buying and selling it with another person. And so you're not, unless the company is releasing additional stocks, the company doesn't benefit from that other than to maybe borrow against it because their stock value and their market value in the market, they can, get other financial instruments on that. But when it comes to something like this, you're directly impacting the companies and what they're building, what they're doing, how they're benefiting the world when you do that. So go learn more at nergea.com about how you can, I'm sure you have all kinds of financial documents and prospectus and historics and all kinds of stuff that anybody out there that loves to scour that stuff on Yahoo Finance and they're familiar with it here, you have it there and you're filed on Edgar. Some of these people will be familiar with that term. That's where you put your documents. So it's all, it's all right there. So
we range from sort of videos that explain, what it is to own a solar asset in Brazil, all the way up to an SEC offering circular with the details of the contracts and the financial statements. So hopefully there's a level of due diligence in there for everybody.
So now Reg A Plus is a US based instrument for raising capital, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so is there a requirement that it's only US based resident investors, or can people invest in Reg A Pluses from around the world?
I don't think there's anything that explicitly prohibits other people from around the world from buying into a Reg A. In our country, it's their country that would prevent that. So every country has its own SEC, its own, protection over its own investors. So since we're only really registered with the US, our entire investor base is American. Although our assets are all over the world, our investors are US citizens. We would like to expand the investor base to include, European investors, Latin American investors, Australian investors, perhaps down the road. But there's so much untapped potential in the American investor community right now that, and also being American, I would like to see our retirement planning and our family financial and investing strategies and things that we pass down to our children should include renewable energy. And I think that we as a country should make a concerted effort to buy up the new modern infrastructure of the world. So, I'm okay with it being an American-based investor base now.
Absolutely.
See where it goes.
So when you talked all about how the grid works, is that grid really worldwide? So do we benefit at some point here from a solar, for example, or is it really just in those regions they're benefiting and they have their own grid and then we have our own grid?
Well, they all have their own grid, but we have a shared atmosphere. So whenever anybody throws carbon dioxide up there, it's all of our problems. So we need to really decarbonize all the world's electric grids. And there's a lot of money to be made in being an early mover into some of the markets that Americans shriek from. Like Brazil was kind of, everybody looked at me like we had two heads when we started investing down there, but it has been a fabulous investment journey. One of the best plays of my life has been moving down there. We are building stuff in South Africa right now. We are building stuff in Zimbabwe right now. And we are professionals at this. We mitigate risk in currency and look at policy and taxation and central bank rules and try to understand how we can actually make professional grade plays in these alternative markets, and in order to find the biggest returns for our investors and ourselves as investors.
Yeah. So it would almost seem, and this is just sort of like a perception of mine, that in some of those places, the same sort of model that you did where, like with the Walmarts of the world, is it the same where you're building the plant and they're guaranteeing they're going to buy a certain amount down there? And they must love that, because a lot of those places don't have the kind of tax revenue bucket that we have in the United States
or
to be able to
access to consistent electricity.
Yeah. Right. I mean, they don't have
to have a power service.
Yeah. And they don't have to import, oil and gas. They can be somewhat self-sustaining in their communities because they have sun.
That's the idea. And it's a huge service. We provide cheaper, more consistently available, cleaner electricity.
Yes.
So it sells pretty well.
Yes. Well, very good. So anything that I've not covered in asking you about this that you would like to share?
It's really, I think you did a great job of explaining the Regulation A, our business and how it works. And, I hope some of your listeners find an interest in combining their environmental objectives with their financial objectives. For those of you that care to do so, and for others who are really seeking yield to first batter down their financial hatches, I think we can scratch either itch. And so we encourage people to give Energea a try. And that's why we made the investment minimum so low, so that people don't bet the farm, but you maybe give it a little taste, like you should do with any investment, and experience the monthly dividends for yourself. And if it's something that you enjoy, then, we see a lot of people increasing their level of commitments to the Energea product month over month.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you, Mike, for being on the show and the Compassionate Capitalist Show. This has been, I've learned a good bit. You broke it down on that river thing. I got that down now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where we can collaborate more in the future, and helping you achieve your objectives, because I think the world is better off as a result of Energea being in the marketplace. So thank you
so much. Heck yeah.
All right. Likewise. Onwards and upwards. Please, again, visit energea.com and karenrands.co to get more information about how we work with investors and access to the book and all that good stuff. Onwards and upwards. Thank you, everybody.